My name is Elena, and I am 32 years old. I work as an emergency room nurse at one of the busiest hospitals in Minneapolis. Last Thanksgiving, my entire family sat around my mother's dining table, and she started choking on a piece of turkey. Everyone panicked. My father, a retired heart surgeon, stood frozen. My brother, a corporate lawyer, fumbled with his phone. My sister, a dermatologist, went pale as a ghost. But me, the daughter they always called just a nurse, I was the only one who moved. Before we dive into this story, I would love to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. If you have ever felt underestimated by the people who should believe in you the most, hit that like button right now. And if you want to hear how one dinner changed everything my family thought they knew about me, make sure you subscribe and stay until the end. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happened after the paramedics were no longer needed. To understand what happened that Thanksgiving night, you need to know where I come from. On paper, my family looks like the American dream. My father, Dr. Robert Harmon, spent 30 years as a cardiothoracic surgeon. He operated on governors, celebrities, and CEOs. Even in retirement, universities still invite him to lecture, and medical journals still publish his opinions. He walks into any room expecting respect, and he always gets it. My mother, Patricia Harmon, was a law professor at the University of Minnesota for over 2 decades. She specialized in corporate law, and after leaving academia, she became a legal consultant for Fortune 500 companies. She charges more per hour than most people make in a day. Growing up, I watched powerful executives treat her like their most trusted advisor. Then there is my brother Marcus. He is 38 now, and he is exactly the son my parents always wanted. After graduating top of his class from law school, he joined one of the biggest corporate law firms in the country. Last year alone, he earned over $2 million. He drives a car that costs more than my apartment. He married a woman from old money, and they live in a house with more bathrooms than people. My sister Diana is 35. She followed in my father's footsteps, sort of. She went to medical school, but she chose dermatology because, as she once told me, I wanted the money without the stress. She now owns 2 cosmetic clinics in Edina, the wealthiest suburb in Minnesota. Her clients are trophy wives and aging executives desperate to look younger. She has never performed CPR in her life, and she has certainly never held someone's hand while they died. And then there is me, Elena, the youngest. The afterthought. I knew I wanted to be a nurse when I was 16 years old. It was a Tuesday afternoon in October, and I was walking home from school when I heard the crash. A sedan had run a red light and slammed into a minivan about 50 feet in front of me. I still remember the sound of metal twisting glass shattering and then the screaming. A woman was trapped in the minivan. Blood everywhere. People gathered around, but nobody knew what to do. We just stood there paralyzed, waiting for something, someone, anything. Then this woman pushed through the crowd. She was wearing scrubs, and she had clearly just finished a shift somewhere. Without hesitation, she climbed into the wreckage. She talked to the injured woman, kept her calm, applied pressure to her wounds, and gave instructions to the rest of us. You call 911. You find me something clean to use as a bandage. You keep talking to her, do not let her close her eyes. The ambulance arrived 8 minutes later, and the paramedics said that woman in scrubs had saved the victim's life. Those 8 minutes mattered more than anything the surgeons would do later at the hospital. I watched that nurse walk away afterward, covered in a stranger's blood, and I thought to myself, that is what I want to do. Not waiting in an operating room for someone else to bring me a patient who has already been stabilized. I want to be the first one there. I want to be the one who fights for those 8 minutes. When I told my family I was going to nursing school, the silence was deafening. My father did not speak to me for an entire week. When he finally did, all he said was, I hope you know what you are giving up. My mother cried. Not tears of joy, but tears of disappointment. She kept saying, You have an IQ of 140. You scored in the 99th percentile on every standardized test. You could have been anything, and you are choosing to be a nurse. She said the word nurse like it was something shameful, something to be hidden. Marcus laughed when he heard. Well, at least you will never be unemployed. Someone always needs their bedpan changed. Diana was more subtle, but no less cutting. She gave me a sad smile and said, "Maybe you will change your mind after a semester. It is not too late to apply to medical school." None of them asked me why. None of them wanted to hear about the woman in scrubs, or the 8 minutes that changed my life, or what I believed nursing really meant. They had already decided what my choice said about me. I was not ambitious enough. I was not smart enough. I was not good enough to be one of them. That was 10 years ago. And for 10 years, nothing changed. To my family, I was always just a nurse. You might think that after a decade, I would have gotten used to it. But the truth is, you never get used to being dismissed by the people who are supposed to love you the most. Every family gathering, every holiday dinner, every casual phone call reminded me exactly where I stood in their eyes. Let me tell you about my graduation from nursing school. It should have been one of the proudest days of my life. I had worked so hard. I had aced my clinicals. My instructor said I was one of the best students they had ever taught. I was ready to walk across that stage and start the career I had dreamed about since I was 16. My parents arrived 30 minutes late. They blamed traffic, but I knew better. Marcus's firm had a big client meeting that morning, and they had gone to wish him luck first. When I finally received my diploma, I looked out into the audience for them. My father was checking his phone. My mother was looking at her watch. After the ceremony, we were supposed to go to dinner to celebrate. Instead, Marcus called to say his meeting had turned into an impromptu celebration because he had landed a major client. Suddenly, my graduation dinner became drinks at Marcus's apartment to toast his success. I ended up ordering pizza alone that night, sitting in my tiny studio apartment still wearing my graduation dress. I told myself it did not matter. I told myself I was proud of myself, even if they were not. But around midnight, I finally let myself cry. 4 years into my career, I was promoted to charge nurse. In the ER, that is a significant achievement. It meant I was trusted to oversee the entire nursing staff during my shifts, to make critical decisions during emergencies, to be the person everyone else turned to when things went wrong. I was 26 years old, and I was already leading a team in one of the most high-pressure environments in medicine. I called my mother to share the news. Her response still echoes in my head. "That is nice, honey. But a charge nurse is still a nurse, right? Diana just opened her second clinic. Maybe you two should talk. She might have some advice about advancing your career." And just like that, my promotion meant nothing. And it was just another reminder that no matter what I accomplished, I would never measure up to my siblings. Marcus's wedding was particularly painful. The ceremony was at a country club, the reception in a ballroom that probably cost more to rent for one night than I make in 3 months. When I arrived, I was directed to my table. It was in the back corner near the kitchen entrance, with the distant relatives nobody really knew, and a few of Marcus's work acquaintances, who were too low-ranking for the important tables. I watched my father give a speech about his 2 accomplished children, specifically naming Marcus and Diana. I was not mentioned once. I spent most of that night hiding in the bathroom touching up makeup that kept getting ruined by tears I could not control. For my 30th birthday, I decided to do something different. I hosted a small party at my apartment and invited my family. I cooked for days. I decorated. I even bought expensive wine because I knew my parents judged anything that was not up to their standards. I wanted just once to have them in my space celebrating me. My parents arrived an hour late because they had been at a charity gala for the hospital where my father used to work. Marcus did not come at all. He sent a text that said, "Sorry sis, case emergency. Catch up soon." The catch-up never happened. Diana showed up, but spent most of the evening looking at her watch and answering texts. She left after 45 minutes. Their gift to me was a department store handbag that was clearly purchased last minute, probably by an assistant. The previous year for Diana's birthday, the entire family had chipped in to buy her a Lexus. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every Easter, the script was the same. Someone would ask me, "So, Elena, when are you going back to school? Nursing is a great stepping stone to medical school." Or Or my father would introduce his children to his colleagues. This is Marcus. He is a partner at his law firm. This is Diana. She owns her own practice. And this is Elena. She is a nurse. The way he said it always made it clear I was the footnote, the afterthought, the child who had not quite lived up to the family name. The worst part? I was excellent at my job. My colleagues respected me. Doctors specifically requested to work with me because they knew I would catch things they missed, that I would advocate for patients, that I would never take shortcuts. I had been nominated for the Minnesota Nurse of the Year award 3 years in a row. Families of patients I had helped sent me cards, flowers, sometimes even gifts to thank me for what I had done for their loved ones. But none of that mattered to my family. In their world, a nurse was just someone who fetched things for doctors, someone who emptied bedpans and changed sheets, someone who could not quite make it to the top, so they settled for the bottom. They had no idea who I really was. They had never bothered to find out. And honestly, after 10 years, I had stopped trying to show them. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, something happened at work that would change everything. But at the time, I did not realize how important it would become. It was a Thursday night around 9:30. I was charge nurse for the overnight shift, which meant I was responsible for managing the entire emergency department staff. We were already running at full capacity when the call came. A school bus had been hit by a semi-truck on the highway. 17 children were being transported to our hospital, ages ranging from 6 to 12, multiple traumas, some critical. The next 6 hours were the most intense of my career. Ambulances arrived in waves, crying children, frantic parents, blood, broken bones, the sound of ventilators and heart monitors overlapping with screaming and sobbing. We did not have enough beds, so we converted hallways into triage areas. We did not have enough staff, so people stayed past their shifts running on adrenaline and coffee, and the desperate need to save every single child we could. I coordinated everything. I assigned nurses to the most critical cases. I managed the flow of patients. I communicated with surgeons and radiologists. I made decisions that could not wait for a doctor's approval. In a mass casualty event, there is no time for hierarchy. There is only the work. But the case that still haunts me, the one that ended up on the news, involved a 7-year-old girl named Lily. She had been sitting in the back of the bus when the truck hit. The impact threw her forward, and she hit her head on the seat in front of her. By the time she reached us, she was unconscious, and her heart had stopped. I took over her care myself. I started CPR immediately, and did not stop. Chest compressions are exhausting. After 2 minutes, your arms start to burn. After 5 minutes, you can barely feel them. After 10 minutes, most people have to switch out. I did not switch out. I could not. This little girl, 7 years old with pink sneakers still on her feet and a friendship bracelet on her wrist, was not going to die on my watch. 12 minutes. That is how long I did CPR before her heart started beating again. 12 minutes of pushing on a child's chest, counting compressions, refusing to give up even when everyone around me was starting to lose hope. When we finally got a pulse, the room erupted. Nurses cried. Doctors who never show emotion had tears in their eyes. And I just stood there shaking, covered in sweat, barely able to feel my arms, thinking she is alive. She is going to be okay. What I did not know was that a CBC news crew had been at the hospital covering the accident. They had cameras in the hallways, and they had captured footage of me working on Lily. A reporter approached me afterward to request an interview, but I declined. There were still patients who needed me. I did not have time to talk to cameras. The story aired a few days later, but I never watched it. I did not tell my family about it either. Why would I? They had never shown any interest in my work before. Every time I tried to share something from the hospital, they changed the subject or interrupted me with news about Marcus's cases or Diana's clinic. I had learned a long time ago that my stories did not matter to them. So I kept it to myself. I went back to work, did my shifts, and prepared for Thanksgiving, like nothing extraordinary had happened. My mother called a week before the holiday. Elena, you are bringing the salad this year, and please do not buy it from a store like you did last time. Make it yourself. We have guests. I spent my only day off that week making a salad from scratch. Homemade dressing, fresh vegetables from the farmer's market. I also bought an expensive bottle of wine as a gift, something I thought my parents would appreciate. When I arrived at my parents' house on Thanksgiving evening, the driveway was already full. My parents, Marcus and his wife Diana, and her husband, and several of my parents' colleagues were mingling in the living room. The house looked beautiful, professionally decorated with autumn centerpieces and elegant table settings. I walked in carrying my salad bowl and wine. Nobody noticed. They were all gathered around Marcus, listening to him describe a lawsuit he had just won. $50 million, he was saying. His biggest case ever. People were congratulating him, shaking his hand, clapping him on the shoulder. I set my contributions on the kitchen counter and joined the edge of the group. My father saw me and nodded briefly. Elena, good you made it. Put the salad on the table. That was my greeting. No hug, no, how are you? No acknowledgement that I had spent my day off cooking for this dinner. Just an instruction. When we sat down to eat, I was placed at the far end of the table next to a retired colleague of my father's, who spent most of dinner talking about golf. My mother tasted my salad and announced loudly, "This needs more salt." Diana's store-bought pie, meanwhile, was praised as absolutely divine. During dinner, one of the guests asked me where I worked. Before I could answer fully, Marcus interrupted with a joke. "Elena's at the hospital, but do not worry, she will not be operating on anyone. She is a nurse." Everyone laughed politely. I forced a smile. Later, my father stood to make a toast. He raised his glass and looked around the table, smiling at his family and friends. I want to take a moment to acknowledge what a remarkable year this has been for the Harmon family. Marcus won the biggest case of his career. Diana was named one of Minnesota's top dermatologists by Minnesota Monthly magazine. I am so proud of my two accomplished children. He did not mention me. I stared at my plate, blinking rapidly, willing myself not to cry. 10 years, and nothing had changed. I was invisible. I was nothing. I was just Elena, the daughter who became a nurse. And then my mother started choking. It happened so fast. One moment my mother was laughing at something Diana's husband had said. The next moment she stopped mid-laugh. Her hand flew to her throat. Her eyes went wide. No sound came out of her mouth, not even a cough. I recognized the signs immediately. Complete airway obstruction. She was not coughing because she could not get any air past the blockage. She was choking in silence, which is the most dangerous kind. For about 3 seconds, nobody else realized what was happening. My mother was just sitting there, hand at her throat-mouth open face, starting to change color. Then Diana screamed. Chaos erupted. My father jumped to his feet so fast he knocked over his wine glass. Red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood. "Patricia, Patricia," he yelled, but he did not move toward her. He just stood there frozen, his surgeon's hands hanging useless at his sides. 30 years of operating on hearts, and he could not function when it was his own wife choking in front of him. Marcus fumbled for his phone. He was trying to call 911, but his hands were shaking so badly he kept hitting the wrong numbers. I heard him swear under his breath, "Delete, start again, delete again." Diana had gone completely pale. She was a doctor. She had an MD after her name. But she had spent the last decade injecting Botox and performing laser treatments. She had not dealt with an actual medical emergency since her residency, and even then she had avoided anything too intense. She sat there, paralyzed, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "Mom, Mom, Mom," like a prayer. The guests were backing away from the table, some of them gasping, some of them just staring with their mouths open. One woman had her hand over her heart. A man was saying, "Someone do something," without making any move to do something himself. My mother's face was turning blue. I was already on my feet by the second. By the third second, I was moving. My voice came out calm and clear, cutting through the panic like a scalpel. "Everyone move, Now! I did not wait to see if they obeyed. I was already behind my mother, wrapping my arms around her midsection, positioning my fist just above her navel. I had done this hundreds of times. In the ER, choking is common. Elderly patients with swallowing difficulties, children who put things in their mouths, intoxicated adults who eat too fast. I had cleared airways while alarms blared and families screamed and chaos swirled around me. This was no different, except it was my mother. I performed the Heimlich maneuver. 1 thrust, 2, 3, 4, 5, nothing. The blockage was not moving. My mother's body was going limp against me. I could feel her losing consciousness. I adjusted my grip, repositioned my hands slightly higher, and increased the force. 6, 7. On the 7th thrust, a piece of turkey shot out of her mouth and landed on the tablecloth. My mother gasped a horrible rattling sound, and then she started coughing. Coughing is good. Coughing means air is moving. Coughing means alive. I guided her to sit down, keeping one hand on her back, one hand checking her pulse. Breathe slowly, Mom. In through your nose, out through your mouth. You are okay. You are going to be okay. Her pulse was rapid but strong. Her color was coming back. The coughing subsided into deep, shaky breaths. I checked her pupils, asked her simple questions to assess her mental status, listened to her breathing to make sure the airway was fully clear. Marcus finally got through to 911. I took the phone from him and spoke to the dispatcher myself, describing what had happened and my assessment of my mother's condition. The dispatcher confirmed that based on what I was reporting, transport to the hospital was probably not necessary, but they recommended monitoring for the next few hours. I hung up and looked around the room for the first time since I had started moving. Everyone was staring at me. My father had not moved from where he stood when he knocked over his wine. His face was a mask of shock. Marcus was still holding his hand out as if waiting for me to give the phone back, even though I already had. Diana was sobbing quietly, mascara running down her cheeks. The guests were pressed against the walls, watching me, like I was something they had never seen before. My mother reached up and grabbed my hand. Her grip was weak, but it was there. "Elena," she whispered, her voice hoarse. You saved—" "Do not try to talk yet," I said gently. "Just breathe." But the look in her eyes said everything. For the first time in my entire adult life, my mother was looking at me with something other than disappointment. It was not over, though. The universe, it seemed, had one more surprise for my family that night. About 20 minutes later, after I had gotten my mother settled on the couch with water and a blanket, someone turned on the television. I think they were trying to break the tension to fill the heavy silence with background noise. The screen flickered to life, and CBC News appeared. Our top story tonight continues to be the heroic efforts following the school bus accident 2 weeks ago. New footage has emerged showing the dedicated medical team at Minneapolis General Hospital fighting to save 17 children injured in the crash. Among those being praised for their efforts is ER nurse Elena Harmon, who performed CPR for 12 consecutive minutes to save the life of 7-year-old Lily Chen. And there I was, on the screen, in my scrubs, sweat soaking through, hair falling out of my ponytail hands, pressed against a little girl's chest. The footage showed me counting compressions, my face intense with focus, refusing to stop even as the minutes ticked by. It showed the moment we got a pulse and me leaning against the bed afterward, shaking with exhaustion and relief. The room had gone completely silent again. My father slowly turned to look at me. My brother's mouth was hanging open. My sister made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. "Elena," Marcus said finally. Why did you not tell us about this?" I was standing near the doorway, arms crossed over my chest. I had not realized the news segment was going to air. I had not even known they had footage of me specifically. And I certainly had not planned for my family to see it like this 10 minutes after I had saved my mother's life. I looked at my brother, at my sister, at my parents, at all these people who had spent 10 years treating me like I was less than them. "No one ever asked what I do at the hospital," I said quietly. Every time I tried to tell you about my work, you changed the subject. You interrupted. You made jokes about bedpans and being a doctor's assistant. I paused. Why would I tell you about saving a little girl's life when you do not even think my job is worth talking about? The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. That night, after the guests had awkwardly excused themselves and gone home, my family sat in the living room. Just the 5 of us. My father, my mother, Marcus, Diana, and me. The television was off now. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner, and my mother's occasional cough as her throat continued to recover. I sat in the armchair by the window, deliberately separate from the others. I was exhausted emotionally and physically. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind a strange numbness. Part of me wanted to leave, to drive back to my apartment and process everything alone. But another part of me, a part I had tried to silence for years, wanted to stay. Wanted to finally have the conversation we should have had a decade ago. My father spoke first. He had not said a word to me since the choking incident, just watched me from across the room with an expression I could not read. Now he stood, walked over to where I was sitting, and lowered himself onto the ottoman in front of my chair. Elena. His voice cracked. I had never heard my father's voice crack before. In 30 years of marriage to my mother and raising 3 children, in performing thousands of surgeries where lives hung in the balance, I had never seen him show this kind of vulnerability. I do not know what to say. Then do not say anything, I said. It came out harsher than I intended. He shook his head. No, I need to say this. He looked down at his hands, the hands that had held countless hearts, and then back up at me. Tonight, when your mother was choking, I froze. 30 years as a surgeon, and I stood there like I had never been inside a hospital. The OR is different, I said, softening slightly. Everything is controlled, sterile. You have a team of plan equipment. That is exactly my point, he said. I have spent my entire career in that controlled environment, and I convinced myself that made me superior, that the surgeons were the real heroes, and everyone else was just support staff. He reached out and took my hand. His palm was warm and rough. Tonight I watched you. You did not hesitate for a single second. You assessed the situation, took control, performed the procedure, monitored your patient, even talked to the 911 dispatcher like it was nothing. And then I saw you on that news program doing CPR for 12 minutes on a child. His voice broke again. I have never done CPR for 12 minutes in my life. I do not know if I could. You could if you had to, I said. Maybe, but that is not the point. He squeezed my hand. The point is I have spent 10 years dismissing what you do, treating your career like it was some kind of failure because you did not become a doctor. And I was wrong. I was so wrong, Elena. Your mother is alive right now because of you. That little girl is alive because of you. And I never even asked you about your work. I never wanted to know. My mother spoke from the couch, her voice still raspy. I remember what I said when you told us you wanted to be a nurse. I said you were wasting your potential. I said nurses were just assistants. She pressed a hand to her chest. Tonight, no assistant saved my life. You saved my life. My daughter, who I treated like a disappointment for a decade. Diana was crying openly now. I am so sorry, Elena. I have been so awful to you. All those comments about my clinics, about advancing your career. I was jealous, I think. You always seemed so sure about what you wanted to do. You never cared about the money or the prestige. You just wanted to help people. And I could not understand that, because I have never felt that way about anything. Marcus stood and walked over to me. My brother, who had spent years mocking me, looking down at me, treating me like the family disappointment. He knelt beside my father's ottoman. Elena, I am sorry. For every joke, every dismissive comment, every time I made you feel small. He ran a hand through his hair. I win lawsuits. That is what I do. I argue and negotiate and bill hours. And I thought that made me important. But tonight, when Mom was dying right in front of me, I could not do anything except panic and fumble with my phone. You saved her life in less time than it took me to dial 3 numbers. I looked at my family, at these people who had hurt me for so long without even realizing it, at their tear-stained faces and their genuine remorse. I had imagined this moment so many times over the years, dreamed about the day they would finally see me. But now that it was happening, I did not feel the vindication I had expected. I just felt tired and sad, and maybe underneath it all, a little bit hopeful. Do you know why I never told you about my work? I said slowly. It is not just that you did not ask. It is that you made it clear you did not want to know. Every time I started talking about a patient or a difficult shift, someone would interrupt, or change the subject, or make a comment about when I was going to move up to something better. I took a breath. I have saved hundreds of lives, literally hundreds. I have held dying people's hands and told them they were not alone. I have hugged sobbing parents after giving them the worst news of their lives. I have worked 36-hour shifts because we did not have enough staff and patients kept coming. I have been screamed at, thrown up on, punched, bitten, and threatened. And through all of it, I never stopped loving my job. Because being there for people on the worst day of their lives is not less than standing in an operating room. It is different, but it is not less. You are right, my father said. It is not less. I was a fool to ever think otherwise. We all were, my mother added. I looked at each of them in turn. I appreciate what you are saying tonight. I do. But I need you to understand something. I did not save Mom's life so that you would finally respect me. I saved her life because that is who I am. That is what I do. And I would have done it even if none of you ever changed your minds about me. We know, Diana said softly. Good, I stood up. Because I am not going to pretend that one night fixes 10 years of being treated like the family failure. I forgive you, I do. But forgiveness and healing are not the same thing. It is going to take time for me to believe that things are really different. My mother nodded, wiping her eyes. We understand, and we will prove it to you, however long it takes. For the first time that evening, I felt something unclench in my chest. Not happiness exactly, not closure, but maybe the beginning of something new. The weeks after Thanksgiving were strange. I kept waiting for things to go back to normal for my family, to slip back into their old patterns of dismissal and disregard. But to my surprise, they did not. My father called me 2 days after the dinner. Not a quick check-in, but a real conversation. He asked about my shifts, my patients, the challenges I faced at work. He listened without interrupting. At the end of the call, he asked if he could visit the hospital someday to see me in my element. I said yes. He came the following week. I was not sure what to expect, but he showed up in casual clothes. No white coat, no doctor's authority. He just observed. He watched me triage patients, coordinate with doctors, manage the organized chaos of the ER. At one point, we had 3 critical cases come in within 30 minutes of each other, and I directed the entire response while he stood in the corner watching. Afterward, he found me in the break room eating a granola bar because I had not had time for a real meal. I had no idea, he said simply. The pace, the pressure, the decisions you have to make every minute. I had no idea. Most people do not, I replied. He nodded slowly. I am going to write something, an article for one of the medical journals I work with, about the critical role of nurses in emergency medicine, about how we have undervalued and overlooked an entire profession. He paused. Would that be okay with you? I was surprised. My father had never asked my permission for anything. Yeah, I said. That would be okay. The article was published 6 weeks later. It was titled, The Invisible Heroes: Why Medicine Needs to Rethink How We Value Nurses. Several nursing organizations shared it. It sparked conversations in medical schools. My father received both praise and criticism, but he stood by every word. My mother's change was different, but equally meaningful. Once she recovered fully from the choking incident, she started volunteering at the hospital. Not as a legal consultant or in any official capacity. She just wanted to understand. She spent time with patients, helped with administrative tasks, talked to nurses and doctors and orderlies. She said she wanted to see the world I lived in. 3 months later, she used her legal expertise to help a group of nurses who were suing their hospital for unsafe staffing ratios. She won the case. After that, she established a scholarship fund for nursing students, specifically targeting those from families who pressured them toward more prestigious careers. She named the scholarship after me. Marcus stopped making jokes about my job. More than that, he started asking genuine questions. When his firm was revising their employee health benefits, he called me for advice. "You know this stuff better than any consultant we could hire," he said. I helped them design a better package, one that actually served employees instead of just looking good on paper. Diana and I started meeting for coffee every Saturday morning. For the first few weeks, we mostly made small talk circling around the deeper conversations we were not ready to have. But slowly, she started opening up. "I became a dermatologist because it was easy," she admitted one morning. "Good money, low stress, no emergencies. But I do not think I have ever actually helped anyone. Not the way you help people." She stirred her coffee, not meeting my eyes. "I have been thinking about adding a free clinic day at my practice for people who cannot afford cosmetic procedures but need dermatological care for real medical conditions, skin cancer screenings, that kind of thing." "That sounds amazing," I told her. "Yeah, well, I have a good role model now." The little girl I saved, Lily, found me too. Her parents tracked me down through the hospital and asked if they could visit. I said yes, not sure what to expect. Lily walked into the hospital lobby holding a bouquet of flowers that was almost as big as she was. She had pink sneakers on the same color as the ones she had been wearing the night of the accident, and a friendship bracelet on her wrist. She marched right up to me, looked me in the eye and said, "You are my superhero." I crouched down to her level. "You know what, I think you are pretty brave yourself. Not everyone survives what you went through. My mom says you would not stop trying to save me, even when everyone else thought it was too late." "That is true," I admitted. She thought about this for a moment. "I want to be a nurse when I grow up, so I can save people like you saved me." I blinked back tears. That is the best thing anyone has ever said to me. Before she left, I gave her a small teddy bear dressed in nurse scrubs. "You do not need a cape to be a superhero," I told her. "You just need to care about people enough to help them when they need it most." By Christmas that year, something had fundamentally shifted in my family. The holiday dinner was at my parents' house again, but this time my father's toast was different. He stood at the head of the table, glass raised, and looked directly at me. "This year, I want to start by honoring someone I should have honored a long time ago. My daughter, Elena. She is an emergency room nurse. She has saved more lives than I can count, including her mother's. She does work that I could not do in conditions I could not handle with a dedication I can only admire. Elena, I am proud of you. I should have said that years ago. I am saying it now, and I will keep saying it for the rest of my life." It was not a perfect speech. It did not erase 10 years of hurt. But it was a start. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged at that table. It has been a year since that Thanksgiving. A year since my mother choked on a piece of turkey, and everything I thought I knew about my place in my family changed. I would be lying if I said the healing was easy. 10 years of feeling invisible, of being dismissed and overlooked, of internalizing the message that I was somehow less than my siblings. Those wounds do not disappear overnight. Even now, there are moments when I catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the old patterns to reassert themselves. But I have also learned something important over this past year. I have learned that forgiveness is not about forgetting. It is about choosing to let go of the weight of resentment so that it does not crush you. I have learned that people can change, really change, if they are willing to do the work. And I have learned that my value was never dependent on my family's opinion of me. It was always there in every patient I helped, every life I touched, every decision I made under pressure. I started seeing a therapist a few months ago, not because I was falling apart, but because I realized I had spent so many years defining my worth through other people's eyes that I had lost sight of how to define it for myself. My therapist helped me understand that being strong does not mean never asking for help, that being independent does not mean carrying everything alone. I have also invested more in the relationships that sustained me through those hard years. My colleagues at the hospital, my friends, the community of nurses who understood what this job really means. These are the people who saw me clearly when my own family could not. But I have not cut my family out either. The relationships are different now, more honest, more boundaried. I do not pretend to be fine when I am not, and I do not stay silent when something hurts me. It is uncomfortable sometimes, this new way of being together, but it is also real in a way our family never was before. Last month, I was nominated for Nurse of the Year again, but this time my father was in the audience when they announced my name. My mother cried. Marcus and Diana cheered. It was not redemption exactly because I had never needed to be redeemed, but it was acknowledgement. Finally, after all these years, they saw me. No, that is not quite right. They had always had the ability to see me. It just took almost losing my mother for them to open their eyes. The lessons I carry with me now are simple, but hard-won. Your worth is not determined by what others think of you. The people who love you can also hurt you, and it is possible to forgive them without excusing what they did. Sometimes it takes a crisis for people to wake up to what has been in front of them all along. And choosing a path that others do not understand does not mean you chose wrong. I am Elena Harmon. I am 33 years old now. I am an emergency room nurse at Minneapolis General Hospital. I have held the hands of dying patients and celebrated with families when their loved ones pulled through. I have worked through pandemics and mass casualty events and countless ordinary nights that were anything but ordinary. I have been exhausted and heartbroken and triumphant. And I would not trade this life for anything. If you are listening to this story and any of it feels familiar, if you have ever been dismissed by the people who should support you most, if you have ever been told that your choices were not good enough, if you have ever felt invisible in your own family, I want you to know something. You do not need anyone's permission to be proud of who you are. You do not need a dramatic moment to prove your value. You do not need to wait for others to see what you have always known about yourself. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day the people who doubted you might finally understand, not because you forced them to, but because the truth has a way of revealing itself eventually. Until then, keep going. Keep doing the work that matters to you. Keep being the person you know yourself to be. That is enough. You are enough. I want to hear from you now. Have you ever been underestimated by your own family? Have you ever had a moment that changed how they saw you? Share your story in the comments below, because I know I am not the only one who has lived this experience. If this story touched you, please hit that like button to let me know. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not defined by anyone else's opinion. Thank you for spending this time with me. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are, whatever you are going through, I am sending you strength. Until next time, take care of yourselves. And remember, heroes do not always wear capes. Sometimes they wear scrubs.